to Zach. What's going on with this giant article that was posted in CoinDesk about Mnuchin? Dig into all the details. What's the TLDR?
Well, we filed a Freedom of Information Act request, and we got something like 230 pages worth of internal documents from the Trump administration regarding its crypto policy. Sometimes you file a FOIA and it works. In this instance, it worked. It's a really interesting perspective and portrait of Trump-era crypto policy. And what materialized from it was ultimately not much, but there are lots of details and color in these documents that really show who was leading the conversation around digital currencies within the White House. A lot of good nuggets in here. This was really a treasure trove that we obtained through a FOIA request. So you can go any number of ways with this one. Lots of good gems that stood out to me. But I'm going to toss this straight back to you, Naomi, for your initial thoughts.
Yeah, well, I thought it was interesting in that it kind of describes Mnuchin as being not really involved in crypto too much until right at the very end when he passed all that disastrous legislation. Like, I think there was a quote from Jerry Brusso in there about how, Mnuchin didn't really do anything terrible until he did the most terrible thing, which was basically try to add reporting requirements, crazy overreaching reporting requirements for non-custodial wallets. I mean, I remember in the early days of Mnuchin, he started talking, like when he was initially talking about crypto, everyone was like, oh my gosh, the Treasury Secretary is telling you about crypto. And it was all bad. He was like, this is terrible, la, la, la. But he didn't really put that into any policy. And I thought it was interesting how it talks about, there were initially these attempts to get working groups going. And you had all kinds of people, like you had Jack Dorsey trying to get in there. You had like people from all these top companies in the industry trying to get together. That would have been interesting if that had happened. Obviously, COVID happened instead, and no in-person things ended up taking place. But it would have been like an interesting what-if scenario if those working groups had taken place. Maybe Mnuchin would have learned a little bit more about crypto, and then at the very last hour of his tenure wouldn't have tried to sweep through really bad stuff for crypto. I mean, it's like comparing Mnuchin to the Biden administration. I mean, Gensler is so much worse. Like, it was kind of good that Mnuchin didn't really know much about crypto. He just didn't get it, so he didn't really know what to pass, and then just tried to slide things through. Gensler knows just enough to be dangerous, so he's just like hating on crypto and attacking it and going after it, which is so much worse than anything Mnuchin did, which I think is just an interesting comparison. But Christy, I'll throw it to you for your take. What did you get from all of this like ridiculous amount of documentation?
Well, a lot of what you just said, but honestly, I have to say, I thought it was kind of funny that Jared Kushner was the one who first brought stablecoins to the attention of the administration. He's not the guy I would have expected to have started that whole email train of, hey, we should look into stablecoins. But apparently he was the guy. So that was the one that kind of stuck out to me as sort of the fun fact. Maybe not the most, earth-shaking discovery, but definitely a fun thing to find out that, yeah, Kushner was a stablecoin man. Jen?
So one fun fact that I want to touch on, since Naomi mentioned Jack Dorsey, was it was upsetting that he didn't get a +1 to that meeting. So there were some emails that came out where Jack Dorsey's team requested that he bring a +1 because several other leaders of crypto companies were allowed a +1, and he was unfortunately rejected. But one of the nuggets I focused on from this report, which I think was fantastic, was how the U.S. government looked at and continues to look at global crypto policy. So there's a reference made to an email sent from the Ukraine's Deputy Minister of Digital Transformation, and he's concerned that major U.S. crypto exchanges pulled out of the country. And so the reason that was cited by one of the exchanges was that they couldn't identify Crimea residents specifically, and therefore they were at risk of violating sanctions. And this is just so unfortunate to me. I think this is something that continues to happen. The 44 million people, citizens of the Ukraine, lose out on this technology and these financial products because the U.S. regulatory system is just so broad and vague. And that's something we continue to see. So it's just... that was the one upsetting piece that I took away from that to balance off the really fun pieces. But Naomi, I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, and it wasn't just US regulatory framework, it was global. You got FATF, you've got global sanctions against, anyone who seems to have profited from the annexing of the Crimea. And so it's interesting that this kind of resonates in the crypto world as well. I agree with you, Jen. Like, it's just sad to see people losing out when governments start to play these games with each other. And we're like, we don't like your administration, so the people who live in your country all suffer as a result. Like, it's just really sad, and they play these games all the time. But I'll throw it to you, Zach, for your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about public documents is that, they're public. It took 9 months for CoinDesk to obtain these documents. Some of them were redacted, but much of what was provided is, your elected officials hard at work or not, day in, day out. And that's the beauty of the FOIA, is that you get to sort of get this previously closed door to what was going on behind the scenes is now open. And it's interesting to see just how regulators here over the last few years have really started to grapple with cryptocurrency and what these technologies can mean for the world and their economies. So it's going to be interesting to see. Maybe in a few years' time, we'll be able to get some Biden administration documents out on the record. And it's going to be interesting to see if the conversation has evolved or if it's still largely the same questions. I'll toss this to Naomi for your last thoughts.
Yeah, I just think that it's also interesting to look at these documents and see how much of their time is actually spent understanding crypto, learning about it, because someone like the Treasury Secretary is being pulled in a million different directions, is grappling with all kinds of different policies, and the amount of time spent on crypto, is very small compared to like how much time is spent in other areas. And these are the people who are determining policy that affect, hundreds of thousands, millions of people. And yet they don't take the time to understand this because they don't have the time. And yet we're putting all of this power in their hands to be able to shape this industry, to determine this industry that they clearly don't understand. I think that's a very interesting point to think about as well, like why we're giving these people so much power to determine what we're allowed to do in our everyday lives.